Pilot returns from death with a shocking message from heaven. Dale Black's day began like many others, marked by the hum of engines, the steady rhythm of preparation, and the crisp, invigorating smell of aviation fuel. At 19 years old, Dale was already immersed in his passion for flight, a young pilot eager to master every aspect of the skies. The small twin-engine Piper Navajo he boarded that morning was nothing remarkable, yet every aircraft Dale flew held an aura of wonder. To him, flying was not just a career, it was a calling, a dance between human ingenuity and the boundless expanse above. The pre-flight checklist was thorough, as always. Alongside his two colleagues, seasoned pilots he respected, Dale walked through every protocol. The weather was clear, and the flight path was uneventful, a routine trip that seemed no more perilous than dozens he had completed before. But Dale, an optimist by nature, had no inkling that this day would mark a permanent divide in his life, the before and the after. The takeoff was smooth. The engines roared in harmony as the plane ascended into the azure sky, gliding effortlessly above the patchwork of fields and roads below. Dale loved this vantage point, a view that made the world feel infinite and troubles insignificant. From this height, the problems of the world seemed muted, as though the act of flying transcended them all. But in an instant, serenity gave way to chaos. It began with a sudden jolt, an unnatural shudder that rippled through the aircraft. Dale's hands instinctively tightened on the controls as his mind raced through possibilities. Was it an engine failure? Turbulence? Something worse? A burst of static came over the radio, cutting off mid-transmission, leaving a haunting silence in its wake. His colleagues exchanged tense glances, their training suppressing panic but not erasing it. Before Dale could fully process what was happening, the plane lurched violently. A deafening metallic screech filled the cabin as the aircraft began an uncontrollable descent. The horizon tilted wildly, and gravity turned against them, pinning Dale and his crew against their seats. He fought to regain control, his hands moving in a blur of desperate precision. But it was as though the plane had a will of its own, defying all attempts to stabilize. The ground rushed toward them with merciless speed. Dale's heart pounded in his chest, each beat a thunderous drum of impending finality. He glanced at his fellow pilots, their faces pale but resolute, each silently grappling with the stark reality that they might not survive. Training drilled into their minds took over, a final act of defiance against fate. Dale felt an overwhelming urge to pray. The words came unbidden, a plea for protection, for mercy, for something, anything to intervene. The next moments passed in a surreal blur. The impact, when it came, was cataclysmic. The plane slammed into a building with an earth-shattering force, metal crumpling like paper, glass exploding in every direction, and fire igniting in a hungry wave. The world around Dale went dark. When he regained awareness, the pain was immediate and consuming. Every part of his body ached with a ferocity he had never known. He was trapped in the wreckage, pinned under twisted steel and shattered debris. Smoke and flames licked at the edges of his vision, their acrid sting burning his lungs. Somewhere in the chaos, muffled voices and distant sirens signaled the arrival of rescuers. But something strange was happening. Even as his body cried out in agony, Dale felt an eerie detachment. He was no longer bound by the confines of the wreckage. Instead, he found himself hovering above the scene, watching the fiery aftermath from an impossible vantage point. He could see the crumpled plane, the frantic efforts of first responders, and even his own broken body lying motionless amidst the ruins. It was as though time had slowed. The chaos below seemed distant, almost dreamlike, as Dale floated in a serene, weightless state. He felt no fear, no pain, only an overwhelming sense of peace. For a moment, he questioned whether he was still alive. Was this what it felt like to die? Or was this something else entirely? His attention shifted to a brilliant light that seemed to emanate from beyond the scene. It was not the harsh glow of flames or the artificial glare of emergency lights, but a radiant, pure light that beckoned him with an indescribable warmth. Dale felt drawn to it, as though it held the answers to questions he hadn't yet formed. The light was alive, pulsating with love and an unspoken promise of something far greater than the earthly struggle below. But just as suddenly as the experience began, it ended. Dale felt himself pulled back into his body with a jarring force. The pain returned, sharp and unrelenting, but so too did the determination to survive. He became aware of hands pulling at the wreckage, voices shouting encouragement as the first responders worked tirelessly to free him. Though his body was broken, his spirit was alight with something new, something he couldn't yet fully comprehend. Hours later, as he lay in the sterile confines of a hospital bed, Dale reflected on the surreal experience. The memory of floating above the crash, of seeing his lifeless form, and of the beckoning light was vivid and unshakable. He didn't yet have the words to describe it, but he knew it was real. Somehow, in the midst of destruction, he had glimpsed something eternal. This was just the beginning of Dale Black's journey, a journey that would take him from the depths of human suffering to the heights of spiritual revelation. The moments following Dale Black's departure from his broken body were unlike anything he had ever imagined. One moment, he was ensnared by the jagged wreckage of the crash, his body crushed and consumed by unimaginable pain. The next, he was weightless, free, and utterly detached from the chaos below. It was as if an invisible hand had gently lifted him out of his earthly shell, guiding him upward into an entirely different plane of existence. At first, Dale was disoriented. He was fully conscious, his thoughts sharp and unclouded, but everything around him was unfamiliar. He realized he was no longer bound by the limitations of his physical senses. Instead, his perception was heightened in ways that defied explanation. He could see, hear, and feel with a clarity that surpassed anything he had ever known. Colors were more vibrant, sounds were more resonant, and emotions were no longer fleeting impressions, but powerful, tangible forces. As he looked below, Dale could see the crash site clearly. The plane was a mangled, smoking heap of metal, flames licking at its edges as firefighters worked desperately to extinguish them. He saw paramedics surrounding his own body, their faces tense with determination as they worked to stabilize him. It was a surreal sight, watching his broken form from above, detached yet deeply aware that he should not have survived such devastation. Yet, despite the horror below, Dale felt no fear or sadness. Instead, he was enveloped in a profound sense of peace, a peace so complete and overwhelming that it silenced all questions and doubts. It was as though he had been transported to a place where the burdens of the world could no longer reach him, where every fear and sorrow melted away in the presence of something far greater than himself. As he drifted upward, Dale became aware of a radiant light in the distance. This light was unlike anything he had ever encountered. It was not harsh or blinding, but soft and inviting, pulsing with life and energy. The light seemed to call to him, not with words, but with an irresistible pull that stirred something deep within his soul. Dale instinctively knew this light was more than just a phenomenon. It was a presence, a being of immense love and power. The closer he drew to the light, the more he became aware of his surroundings. He found himself in a vast, luminous expanse that defied earthly description. The air, if it could even be called air, was filled with an indescribable music, a symphony of harmonies that resonated in his very being. It was as if the entire environment was alive, vibrating with a love so pure and infinite that it brought tears to his eyes. Dale soon realized he was not alone. Surrounding him were figures of light, beings who radiated warmth and kindness. Though their forms were not entirely human, Dale felt an immediate connection to them, as though they had known him his entire life. These beings did not speak with words, but their thoughts and emotions flowed into him effortlessly, filling him with a sense of belonging and acceptance. He became aware that these beings were guiding him toward the light, encouraging him to move forward. As he drew closer, the light expanded, revealing a breathtakingly beautiful city in the distance. This city was unlike anything Dale had ever seen. It shimmered with a brilliance that surpassed the sun, its buildings crafted from materials that seemed to glow with an inner radiance. Every structure exuded perfection, symmetry, and beauty. Yet there was an organic quality to it, as though it had been designed with love rather than mere skill. The streets of this city were paved with what appeared to be gold, yet it was a gold so pure and luminous that it seemed almost translucent. Rivers of crystal-clear water flowed through the city, their surfaces reflecting every color of the spectrum. Trees and plants flourished in vibrant hues that defied earthly palettes, their leaves shimmering with a life force that seemed to pulse in harmony with the music that filled the air. As Dale walked, or rather glided, through this celestial landscape, he felt an overwhelming sense of joy and awe. There was no pain, no fatigue, no sense of time. Every step brought new wonders, gardens of unimaginable beauty, fountains that sparkled like liquid diamonds, and beings of light who moved gracefully through the city, their presence filling him with peace. At the heart of this radiant city was a throne, surrounded by an intense golden glow. Dale instinctively knew this was the source of the light, the origin of everything he was experiencing. Though he could not see the being seated on the throne clearly, he felt its presence profoundly. A presence that radiated love, wisdom, and power beyond comprehension. It was here, in the presence of this divine light, that Dale began to receive a message. The communication was not verbal, but it flowed into his mind with crystal clarity. The message was simple, yet profound. Life was not an accident or a meaningless series of events. Every soul was created with love, purpose, and intention. The greatest calling of life was to love God, to love others, and to fulfill the unique purpose each person was designed for. Dale felt as though his entire life, every question he had ever asked, was being answered in this moment. He understood that the trials and struggles of life were not meaningless, but were part of a greater plan, a journey that refined and prepared the soul for eternity. He was overwhelmed by the realization that he was deeply loved, not for his accomplishments or failures, but simply for who he was, a child of the Creator. As Dale stood in awe of this revelation, he began to feel a gentle pull, a sense that his time in this celestial realm was coming to an end. Though he longed to stay, he understood that he had a purpose yet to fulfill on earth. The beings of light surrounded him once more, their presence comforting and reassuring. They conveyed to him that he would carry this experience with him, that it would be a source of strength and guidance in the days to come. In an instant, the radiant city and its brilliant light began to fade, replaced by the harsh reality of the hospital room. Dale's body was broken and battered, but his spirit was alive with a newfound clarity and purpose. Though he was back on Earth, he knew he had touched eternity, and the memory of that divine journey would remain etched in his soul forever. The world came rushing back with an unrelenting force as Dale opened his eyes to the sterile brightness of a hospital room. The transition from the celestial peace of heaven to the harsh reality of his broken body was jarring. Pain surged through him, an agonizing reminder of the crash and the destruction it had wrought. Every breath was a labor, every movement a torment. But what struck him most was the overwhelming sense of confinement. He was no longer free, no longer weightless, but bound again by the fragile vessel of his earthly existence. Dale's injuries were catastrophic. Multiple fractures riddled his body. His spine was severely damaged, his arm and leg broken in several places. The burns, lacerations, and bruises covered him like a roadmap of the crash. The doctors, though skilled and compassionate, delivered their prognosis with a somber tone. The fact that Dale had survived at all was nothing short of miraculous, they said, but they made it clear that his recovery would be a long, grueling process if he recovered at all. Paralysis was a looming possibility, as was a lifetime of chronic pain and limited mobility. Yet, as Dale lay there, his body shattered, but his mind clear, he felt an unshakable sense of determination. The memories of what he had seen, what he had experienced in those moments beyond death, were vivid and tangible. He clung to them like a lifeline, replaying every detail of the radiant city, the beings of light, and the overwhelming love that had enveloped him. Though his body was broken, his spirit was unyielding. He had been shown something eternal, something greater than the pain and suffering of this world, and he was resolved to hold on to it. The first days in the hospital were a blur of procedures, medications, and therapy sessions. Each movement, no matter how small, was an exercise in agony. Nurses worked tirelessly to manage his pain and keep his spirits up, while family and friends gathered at his bedside, offering prayers and encouragement. Despite their efforts, Dale knew the road ahead would be his to walk alone, or so it seemed. In his quiet moments, Dale began to pray. He prayed not just for healing, but for understanding. Why had he been shown heaven only to be sent back to a body that seemed beyond repair? Why had he survived the crash when others in similar circumstances had not? What was the purpose of his life now that everything seemed so irreparably changed? The answers did not come immediately, but as he prayed, he felt a deep, abiding presence, a reminder of the divine light he had encountered. It was as though God was whispering to him, urging him to trust, to endure, and to believe that there was still a plan for his life. Rehabilitation began slowly. Physical therapy sessions were grueling, each one pushing Dale to his limits and beyond. The therapists were kind but relentless, urging him to move, to stretch, to rebuild muscles that had atrophied during his initial recovery. There were days when the pain seemed insurmountable, when every fiber of his being cried out to stop, to surrender to the immobility that seemed inevitable. But each time he reached that breaking point, Dale would close his eyes and remember the light. He would remember the message he had received, the promise that life was purposeful, and he would find the strength to continue. Small victories marked his progress. The first time he managed to sit up unassisted. The first time he moved his fingers on his injured hand. The first time he took a step with the aid of a walker. Each milestone was a testament to his perseverance and faith. The doctors, who had once been cautious in their optimism, began to marvel at his recovery. They spoke of the human spirit, of resilience. But Dale knew there was more to it than that. He knew he was being guided, strengthened by something far greater than his own willpower. Throughout this journey, Dale began to notice changes, not just in his body, but in his perspective. The things that had once seemed so important, career ambitions, material success, the approval of others, now felt trivial. He had glimpsed eternity, and it had shifted his priorities entirely. He found himself cherishing the simple moments, the warmth of the sun on his face as he was wheeled outside, the sound of laughter from visiting friends, the quiet comfort of prayer. Life, he realized, was a gift, and every moment, no matter how small, was an opportunity to love, to grow, and to serve. As Dale's recovery progressed, he began to share his experience with those around him. At first, it was hesitant, almost awkward. How could he describe something so profound, so beyond the realm of ordinary understanding? But as he spoke, he saw the impact his story had on others. Nurses who had been hardened by years of witnessing suffering would pause, their eyes filling with tears as he described the light and the love he had encountered. Fellow patients struggling with their own pain and despair would find comfort in his words, inspired by his unwavering faith and determination. Dale's family and friends, too, were deeply moved by his account. Though many of them were already people of faith, hearing Dale's first-hand experience of heaven brought a renewed sense of hope and purpose to their own lives. They saw in him a living testament to the power of God's love and the resilience of the human spirit. But not everyone was quick to believe. Dale encountered skeptics, medical professionals, acquaintances, even strangers, who dismissed his story as a hallucination or a product of trauma. These moments were difficult, but they only strengthened his resolve. Dale knew what he had experienced was real, more real than anything in this world, and he felt a deep responsibility to share it, regardless of the doubts of others. As the weeks turned into months, Dale began to see the bigger picture of his recovery. It was not just about healing his body, it was about transforming his soul. The crash had taken so much from him, his physical strength, his sense of invincibility, but it had given him something far greater, a purpose. He realized that his survival was not an accident, but a calling. He had been sent back to fulfill a mission, to share the message of love, faith, and hope that had been revealed to him. By the time Dale was discharged from the hospital, he was a changed man. He still bore the scars of the crash, both visible and hidden, but he carried them with pride. They were a reminder of the journey he had undertaken, the battles he had fought, and the divine light that had guided him through it all. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a messenger, ready to step into the world and share his story with all who would listen. Dale Black's life after the crash was anything but ordinary. As his body slowly healed, his spirit surged with a sense of purpose that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The message he had received during his journey to heaven was clear. Life was about love, faith, and fulfilling the purpose for which every soul was created. Yet, translating this divine revelation into his earthly existence was not without its challenges. Dale knew that sharing such an extraordinary experience would require courage, conviction, and humility. The message had not been delivered in words. Rather, it was an understanding, an infusion of knowledge that had imprinted itself on Dale's soul. He understood that love was the cornerstone of existence, the love of God, the love for others, and even the love of oneself as a creation of the divine. This love was not the fleeting, conditional affection often seen in the world, but an eternal, selfless force that bound everything together. Faith, he realized, was the bridge that connected humanity to this divine love, a means of trusting in what could not always be seen or understood. And purpose, the unique role that each person was meant to fulfill, was the expression of this love and faith in action. As Dale reflected on these truths, he began to see his own life through a new lens. Before the crash, he had been ambitious, driven by a passion for flying and a desire to achieve success. While these aspirations were not inherently wrong, he now understood that they had been incomplete. He had been focused on what he could accomplish for himself rather than how he could serve others. The crash had stripped him of his physical abilities and his sense of control, forcing him to confront what truly mattered. In the process, he had discovered a deeper calling, a calling to live not just for himself, but for a higher purpose. Sharing this message, however, was not easy. At first, Dale struggled to find the right words. How could he explain something so profound, so otherworldly, to people who had never experienced it? He worried about being misunderstood or dismissed as delusional. Yet, he also felt an urgency to speak, a responsibility to use his second chance at life to make a difference. He began by telling his story to close friends and family, speaking from the heart and trusting that the truth would resonate. To Dale's surprise, his words had a profound impact. Those who heard his story were often moved to tears, inspired by his courage and the hope he conveyed. Many shared their own struggles and doubts, finding comfort in Dale's testimony. Some even experienced renewed faith, reassured that there was more to life than the hardships they faced. The response emboldened Dale, convincing him that his message was meant to be shared with a wider audience. As he recovered further, Dale began to speak publicly, accepting invitations to churches, community events, and even conferences. Standing before crowds, he would recount the harrowing crash, the miraculous journey to heaven, and the divine truths he had learned. He spoke not as a preacher or theologian, but as an ordinary man who had experienced something extraordinary. His sincerity and humility struck a chord with listeners, many of whom found their own faith deepened or rekindled. One of the most profound aspects of Dale's message was its simplicity. He did not claim to have all the answers, nor did he present himself as someone who had mastered life's challenges. Instead, he emphasized the transformative power of love and the importance of trusting in God's plan, even when it seemed incomprehensible. He often quoted the words that had been impressed upon him during his heavenly experience. "You are deeply loved, created for a purpose, and never alone." Dale's message began to take root not only in the hearts of his audiences, but also in his own life. He sought to live out the principles he preached, finding ways to love and serve others in everyday situations. Whether it was offering a kind word to a stranger, volunteering at a local charity, or simply listening to someone in need, Dale viewed each act of kindness as a reflection of the divine love he had experienced. He also deepened his relationships with his family and friends, cherishing the time he spent with them and making a conscious effort to express his gratitude and affection. The message from heaven also inspired Dale to reevaluate his career. While he still loved flying, he no longer saw it as the sole focus of his life. Instead, he viewed it as a platform, a means of connecting with others and sharing his story. He returned to aviation not with the same single-minded ambition he had before, but with a renewed sense of purpose. He began mentoring younger pilots, encouraging them not only to pursue excellence in their craft, but also to consider the deeper meaning of their lives. As Dale continued to share his message, he encountered people from all walks of life, some believers, some skeptics, and some who were searching for answers. While not everyone accepted his story, Dale was never discouraged. He saw every interaction as an opportunity to plant a seed, trusting that it was not his job to convince others, but simply to bear witness to what he had seen and experienced. Over time, he developed a profound respect for the diversity of human experiences, recognizing that everyone was on their own journey of faith and discovery. Perhaps the most challenging moments came when Dale faced skeptics who questioned the authenticity of his experience. Some dismissed his story as a hallucination or a product of his trauma, while others accused him of fabricating it for attention. These encounters were difficult, but Dale remained steadfast. He understood that skepticism was a natural response to something so extraordinary, and he welcomed honest questions and dialogue. Rather than becoming defensive, he would simply share his story with calm conviction, allowing others to draw their own conclusions. Dale also found strength in his faith community, which became a source of support and encouragement. Fellow believers rallied around him, praying for him and celebrating his progress. They saw in Dale a living testament to God's grace and the power of perseverance. His story became a beacon of hope for those facing their own trials, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was light to be found. As Dale reflected on his journey, he often marveled at how his life had been transformed. The crash that had nearly ended his life had instead given him a new beginning, a chance to live with greater purpose and meaning. He was no longer defined by his physical abilities or his accomplishments, but by the love and faith that guided him. Every day was an opportunity to grow, to give, and to share the message that had been entrusted to him. In the years that followed, Dale's testimony would touch countless lives, inspiring others to embrace their own unique purpose and to trust in the enduring power of love and faith. His journey was not without challenges, but it was filled with moments of profound beauty and grace. Through it all, he remained committed to the message he had received, a message that had changed his life and, through him, had the power to change the lives of many others. Life after the crash became a journey of profound transformation for Dale Black. The experience of heaven, the message he carried back, and the recovery that followed had reshaped him in every way. His story was no longer just about survival. It was about purpose, love, and the commitment to live each day as a reflection of the truths he had been shown. Every moment, every encounter became an opportunity to live with intention, to inspire others, and to bring a glimpse of the divine into the lives of those he touched. Dale's mission to share his story and the message from heaven led him down paths he had never anticipated. Initially, he began speaking at local churches and community gatherings, invited by friends and acquaintances who were eager to hear his testimony. These early talks were intimate, often filled with people who already knew him and were invested in his journey. Dale would stand before them, recounting the harrowing details of the crash, the miraculous moments in heaven, and the profound revelations that had followed. He spoke not as a preacher or a theologian, but as someone who had experienced the extraordinary and wanted to offer hope and perspective. The impact of these talks was immediate and far-reaching. People would approach him afterward, tears streaming down their faces, sharing how his story had touched them. Some spoke of renewed faith, others of finding comfort in their own struggles, and many simply thanked him for reminding them that life was more than the daily grind. It was a gift, a calling, a chance to connect with something eternal. Word began to spread, and soon Dale found himself receiving invitations from beyond his community. Larger churches, conferences, and even secular events where people were curious about his experience. At first, Dale was hesitant to step onto these larger stages. Public speaking had never been his forte, and he feared that his story might not resonate with those who didn't already share his beliefs. But as he prayed and reflected, he felt a quiet assurance guiding him forward. His message was not about converting people or convincing them of his truth. It was about planting seeds of hope, faith, and love. He realized that his role was not to control how others received his story, but simply to share it authentically and trust that it would reach those who needed it most. As he began speaking to broader audiences, Dale's reach expanded in unexpected ways. Media outlets caught wind of his story, and he was invited to appear on radio shows, television programs, and podcasts. These platforms allowed him to reach people he never would have encountered otherwise, from all walks of life and corners of the world. Some interviews were straightforward, focusing on the miraculous aspects of his survival and recovery. Others delved deeper, exploring the spiritual dimensions of his experience and the profound impact it had on his worldview. Through these appearances, Dale encountered a wide range of reactions. Many listeners and viewers were deeply moved, reaching out to share their own stories of faith, loss, and hope. Some expressed gratitude for the clarity his story brought to their own questions about life and death. Skeptics, too, were a part of the audience, and while not all were receptive, Dale approached their questions with patience and understanding. He recognized that doubt was a natural part of the human journey, and he saw every interaction as an opportunity to plant a seed, even if the fruit would not be visible for years. Dale's work extended beyond public speaking. He began writing about his experiences, pouring his thoughts and memories onto the page with the hope of reaching an even wider audience. His first book was a labor of love, a detailed account of the crash, his heavenly journey, and the lessons he had learned. It was more than a memoir. It was a testament to the power of faith, resilience, and purpose. The book resonated deeply with readers, many of whom found themselves returning to its pages during times of doubt or despair. Letters and emails poured in, each one a reminder of the impact his story was having. As his message gained traction, Dale felt a growing responsibility to live out the principles he spoke about. He saw his life as a reflection of the divine truths he had encountered, and he strove to embody love, faith, and purpose in every interaction. He became known not just for his story, but for the kindness, humility, and sincerity with which he treated everyone he met. Whether he was speaking to a crowd of thousands or chatting with a single person over coffee, Dale gave his full attention and genuine care. One of the most profound aspects of Dale's journey was the way it transformed his relationships. Before the crash, he had been driven and ambitious, often prioritizing his career over personal connections. But his experience of heaven had shifted his perspective entirely. He now saw his relationships as the most important aspect of his earthly life. Opportunities to give and receive love, to support others, and to create memories that would endure beyond this world. He became more intentional about spending time with his family, expressing his gratitude for their presence in his life, and cherishing even the simplest moments together. Dale's commitment to living with purpose also led him to acts of service. He began volunteering with organizations that supported those facing trauma, loss, or illness, sharing his story and offering encouragement to those in need. He worked with young people, particularly aspiring pilots, mentoring them not just in the technical skills of aviation, but in the importance of character, faith, and perseverance. Through these efforts, Dale found a sense of fulfillment that surpassed anything he had experienced before. He was not just surviving, he was thriving, living out the calling that had been placed on his heart. As the years passed, Dale's impact continued to grow. His story inspired countless individuals to reflect on their own lives, to seek out their unique purposes, and to trust in the power of love and faith. He became a sought-after speaker, author, and mentor, but he never allowed the attention to distract him from his true mission. He remained grounded, constantly returning to the memory of that radiant light, the divine love that had changed everything. Through it all, Dale remained humble and grateful. He knew that his journey was not about him, but about the message he had been entrusted to share. He often reflected on the words he had received during his heavenly encounter. "You are deeply loved, created for a purpose, and never alone." These words became his guiding principle, shaping every decision and interaction. In the end, Dale's life became a living testament to the power of transformation. The crash that had nearly ended his earthly existence had instead opened the door to a new beginning, one filled with meaning, connection, and service. His journey was a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable trials, there is hope, there is purpose, and there is a love that endures beyond all understanding.